Hey guys, so I wanted to do something a little bit different today, and the algorithm is probably absolutely going to kill this video, but I thought it was important to do. December is a really deceptive month for relationships. Something happens called the December illusion, and I really wanted to talk about it to break it down, why it happens, and what you can do about it in the short to midterm in order to minimize its impact. So, the December illusion is basically when December comes, there is a kind of a deception that things are better than they were. So if you've been going through a struggle sort of time in your relationship and December hits, oftentimes things can kind of just fix themselves. So in a lot of the West, the holiday season is around December. You have just coming from Thanksgiving in the US, and then you have December, which is Christmas and New Year, all that sort of stuff. So this means that you're around your family and friends a lot more. December is very much about relationships. And when you've been going through a tough time in your romantic relationship, oftentimes things can start to come to a head. There's a lot of nostalgia and reflection within December, right? You spend a lot of time around your family. You start to realize what's important, what isn't important. And you think a lot more about your relationships because you're around your friends and family. You start to see what is really important. And after a tough period in your relationship, December can start to feel a lot calmer. So let's say you've been having arguments with your partner, you've been having a lot of tough times, maybe you've even spoke about separation and all this sort of stuff. December can actually bring a period of calm. Things can feel a little bit more nostalgic and a lot closer. You can start having a lot more sort of physical intimacy, more I love yous, touch, and talking about the future. Things in December can feel a lot better after a tough November and beforehand. Because of this calmness during December, with our friends, with our family, having good conversations, it can actually cause a lot of polarization between how things were in the past versus how they are now. But when I say now, I'm talking about recently, like November time. So you can start to get all romantic and in your feels about the Christmas period. But what can actually happen is your partner can start to think about, wow, things are good right now. Things used to be like this. We used to not have arguments. And actually, it kind of makes November feel even worse. So all of these feelings and worries that have been building up within your partner's head, they can start to bubble under within December. And it becomes a bigger effort to start to mask, to put on this face of happiness in front of loved ones, right? Having arguments that you were having a month ago is just not going to cut it. You can't have these arguments. So it takes a lot more effort in order to try to present a happy, wonderful sort of feeling presentation in front of friends and family. So if your partner has started to feel a bit hopeless about the relationship, then they realize that during December, they actually have to put a lot more effort. They start to agree to things more. They start to say, yes, absolutely, that's what we'll do in order to avoid an argument, in order to stop blowing up at you in front of the grandparents or the kids or whatever it is. Because ultimately, this is about giving to other people. So there can be this extra effort of masking that happens in December around relationships. And this is why it can be the December illusion, because what a lot of people don't know is that January is actually divorce season. And this is where the most amount of divorces, and you can Google this, the most amount of divorces filings happen within January to March because of all of this time in December and this extra effort in order to try to present this facade of happiness. They just want to get through this tough period and all the effort that it brings, going out shopping, arranging food, all this sort of stuff in order to get through the holidays. And this can give us this feeling that things were actually getting better. There's the perceived satisfaction, right? So during this time, you have November, things were tough throughout this entire period. And then December comes and things feel like they're getting better. The perceived satisfaction of the relationship is more. There's a lot more I love yous. There's a lot more agreement. There's a lot more just saying yes to get through the holidays. But when January hits, then shit hits the fan ultimately, and the perceived satisfaction goes back down. So this period here is the illusion, the December illusion, and it feels like it was getting better. Whereas the reality, the actual satisfaction was even lower than it was before because they had to mask, they had to fake this happiness in order to get through December. And then obviously January comes and the perceived satisfaction matches up to the actual satisfaction. And then moving forward is what they feel like the actual satisfaction will be. So they see this potential future of no satisfaction, of very minimal satisfaction within the relationship, which is why January comes and brings a lot of divorce filings, a lot of tough conversations happen in January onwards, because they're seeing a perceived future of very little. And this can be tough to hear. And maybe you're feeling right now, actually, the relationship was getting better. And I'm not here to burst that bubble. I'm just here to give you the reality of what can happen during December and why it's so important to be so vigilant about your relationship and about your partner's feelings, and to preemptively make sure that you are showing up during the toughest times. So if you've been going through a tough time and things have started to feel better in December, there's a few things that are really important to know. Like, I don't want you to sit there and to blame your partner for lying or pretending. This is something that happens with all of us. We often do similar things in order to get through situations. So it's really important to know that problems build for a long time. So if your partner is preparing to break up or to have a very tough conversation, like, despite what it may seem, this is not sudden. This is not something that has come out of the blue. I don't want you to be shocked. I don't want you to be unprepared for this and to react in a way where you say to your partner, this is totally random, right? Because ultimately, problems in relationships build for a long time in very small ways, but they build up to a point where they compound. So when a partner wants to break up with you, this doesn't happen randomly. This is not some things were fine and then things weren't fine. It happens in a long way. So it's really crucial for you to start to reflect as to where you haven't been showing up, where you could do better, and where you can start showing up better. Start now preparing within December in order to start the year right, to start the year better. So it's really crucial to know that. And in December, if things feel like they're getting better, don't fool yourself into saying that they were getting better. Less arguments does not mean less problems. It just means less arguing about them. So if you are arguing for half of the year, all the way up to December, and then suddenly arguments stopped, this doesn't mean that things are getting better. It means that your partner realized that talking about it didn't change anything. So especially during December, realize that having these arguments is getting you nowhere. So this is really important to know. Less arguments doesn't mean less problems. It just means less talking about it. And especially in December, this happens very regularly, is where it's just keeping the peace. Like we said, it's just getting through December, getting through the holidays, and just surviving through this. And that means shutting up, nodding, saying yes, agreeing to a lot of things, even saying, I love you, just to placate a very stressful situation. And again, this is not about blaming your partner for lying. This is a human reaction. This is normal, and this is not specific to your partner or specific to a specific gender, okay? But if things were getting better and you have a very tough conversation in January, or a divorce or a separation or a breakup, and we'll talk about that in a second, it's really important to know that if things were getting better, things started to get better in November, and you get a very tough conversation in January, then it means that things weren't getting better in a big enough way or fast enough. So even if things were getting better, it's really important to know that things can't just get 1% better. They need to improve in a bigger way. And if your partner raises this in January through whatever means, then it's important to look back and say, okay, things were getting better, but it wasn't good enough. Things need to change. And another really important thing is when you get this tough conversation, maybe even you get a seed of it or a threat of it in December, logic will not help you. So all of these moments, the biggest mistakes that you can make is to try to logic your way through it. Getting a divorce, getting a separation, breakup, whatever it is, this is an emotional decision. When emotions are built up to such a point, when it comes to having discussions about this, logic is not going to help you. So when they say, hey, I think that we need to get a divorce, I think we need to talk about separation, I need some space, I love you, but I'm not in love with you, saying to your partner, well, what about the kids? We need to stay together for the kids. Or we're married, you promised through richer for poorer, through in sickness and in health. What happened to that? Trying to give logical reasons for a very emotional decision is not going to help you. In fact, it's going to make it worse, because what's going to happen is your partner is going to see that you don't understand them enough emotionally to see the valid reasons why they want out of this relationship right now. Coming up with all these logical reasons is going to make things worse. It's important at this point, especially if things are being tough, to start thinking about how you've been showing up. If you want to be a better partner next year, start to think now about how you've been showing up and how you can start to improve the way that you show up in a higher value way, in a better quality way. And it's really important to not fall for what we call good guy syndrome, which I'll link to on the screen and in the description down below, which I made a video on it, about thinking about what value that you're bringing to the relationship. During this time, a lot of guys can get into this idea of like, well, I pay the mortgage and I provide you all of these fancy things and I bought you this and I took us out for meals. This is what we call good guy syndrome, which is fooling yourself into thinking that paying for things or fixing wires in the house or transporting your partner around is enough to be classed as showing up in the relationship. The fact is that this is stuff that your partner can do by themselves. Women can get their own jobs. They can make their own money. They can have their own career. They can pay someone to fix stuff in their house. They can pay for a taxi to drive them around. So you can't sit there and think to yourself that you are providing the value that is important in a modern relationship. So don't fall for good guy syndrome, that it needs more. It needs emotional support and understanding and connection. This is what's crucial in a relationship. So again, logic is not going to help you in this situation. But it's also important to know that it is simple to start turning things around. If you have understood these 3 previous points, that it's been building for a while, things weren't getting better, and logic is not going to help you, then it's actually simple to start turning things around. You will have some points that you can look at, your blind spots that you may have missed and how you've been showing up. And you can start to put in a plan as to how you want to show up moving forward. But it's also important to know that simple doesn't necessarily mean easy. So making these changes, making these decisions in order to improve and grow yourself, it takes a lot of swallowing pride, a lot of removing your own ego, a lot of unlearning ineffective habits, and a lot of self-reflection. So yes, it is simple, but it doesn't mean it's easy. We can't fall into this idea that we are perfect people as we are, perfectly formed. There's a lot of self-help stuff out there that is just like, you're perfect the way you are. Like, don't worry about it. Well, actually, no, we're not. We shouldn't fool ourselves into thinking that. It doesn't mean that we don't have value, but we actually need to stop getting into this idea that we are perfect people and start looking at how we can improve ourselves. If we're always improving ourselves, then that is the most important thing. Not getting into this idea that we shouldn't change. But at the end of the day, we live amongst other people. And in order to live amongst other people and to reap the benefits of living in a society, then we also need to contribute to that. And that means learning relationships, learning how other people work, and learning how to interact and provide value to them, especially when we expect value back from them. This is life, right? So looking at our blind spots and understanding where we could be falling short and where we can start to improve. And this should be an ongoing process. And this should happen regardless of whether your partner asks you for a divorce, asks you to break up, wants to have a separation. This self-growth should be happening regardless. So it's really important to get into this habit of starting to do that. So this is what I do with my members, is getting into finding our blind spots and understanding where we can do better. Communication, emotional regulation, processes to grow how we do things day in, day out, being more productive, being smarter with our decisions, and not falling into these negative mindsets that keep us stuck, right? So self-growth can be done in a very specific way, and not just some vaguely looking at self-help books, but actual self-growth and work in order to reap the benefits further down the line. So if your partner is preparing to ask for a breakup or separation right now, today is the day when you can start to look towards the future and say, how can I show up better? How can I become and grow into being a better man, better woman, better partner, in order to reap the benefits of being in a relationship? Because this needs to happen regardless, right? This is not the relationship's fault. This is our own responsibility to continue to grow and to show up in the right ways. And as always, if you do want to join me, then join me on my free relationship bootcamp, where you'll learn the same steps and tools that all of my members start with. And many of them have been broken up with and still managed to repair the relationship, turning it into something bigger and better than it was before. So if you want to make 2025 your year, join the relationship bootcamp. All you have to do is click on the link in the description to grab your spot and join us. But it can feel like you are doing this by yourself, blindly turning the relationship around by yourself, right? And it feels like it's impossible to do. But many of my members have managed to do that by themselves. So I've actually done a deeper dive video into turning your relationship around by yourself. So I'm going to leave you with that video, and I will see you over there.